Ladies and gentlemen, if you can take your seats, we're about to begin our program. Thank you very much.
The world is changing every day. In different societies around the globe, people are standing up for democracy. Dictators are doing their best to cling to power, but a democratic future cannot be contained forever. Almost 40 years ago, President Ronald Reagan challenged us to create a world in which all people are at last free to determine their own destiny. Since then, the Berlin Wall has been torn down and Eastern Europe pulled back the Iron Curtain. Nations in Latin America, Africa, Asia, and the Middle East have defied tyrannical regimes in pursuit of open and accountable governance. Since 1983, the International Republican Institute has led the way to advance democracy worldwide, pushing for political openness, civil society, and the expansion of human rights. Today, we support this great cause in nearly 100 countries. Our record is one of tremendous impact. We help legislators enhance transparency. We connect office holders with the people they serve. And we have observed over 200 elections around the world. We work with marginalized communities, including women and youth who have been pushed aside. No person is ever too small to make a difference, and their desire to live in a democratic society should be their reality. We must not become complacent in the face of threats. Our democratic values are universal values, and they should not be held back. Please, stand by our side and join us in this journey.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage IRI President Dr. Daniel Twining.
Thank you. It's a great honor and pleasure to be here with all of you tonight. I'm Dan Twining, I'm president of IRI, and isn't it nice to be together to celebrate human freedom in the world? I would like to thank all of our outstanding board of directors, including our chairman, Dan Sullivan, his Senate colleagues who are here with us tonight. Bravo. Our friends at the State Department and USAID who partner with us every day, and at the National Endowment for Democracy, led by my friend Damon Wilson. Thank you. The U.S. Navy Memorial Center, all of you in the private sector who are making this possible tonight, who are here with your support. Thank you. Our outstanding IRI team, led by Judy Van Rest, who organized all of this. Thank you. And my colleague at NDI, Derek Mitchell. You know, Derek and I and all of us at IRI and NDI are very proud that the fight for freedom in the world is not a partisan Republican or Democrat cause, it's an American cause. And so we're honored to have all of you with us today. I would like to just say a very quick word about Secretary of State Colin Powell. Our gratitude to him. We mourn his loss and miss him. A great patriot who served our country his entire life, a recipient of the 1996 IRI Freedom Award. We were very honored. He also led an IRI election observation mission for us. A statesman, a trailblazer, one of our most distinguished public servants. We're very just humbled by the extraordinary accomplishments of this terrific son of America. So please join me just for a quick moment of silence. Thank you. So it's been quite a year for everybody in the democracy business. Of course, we have been struggling not only with the challenges posed by a health pandemic, but by a political pandemic of authoritarianism in the world, a disease that spreads from the world's most vicious tyrannies, a sickness that transcends boundaries, crosses borders, restricts the political and civil rights of other nations, and threatens our way of life. Unfortunately, over the last year, many foes of freedom have felt emboldened. The Chinese Communist Party has continued its extraordinary assault and persecution of its own citizens in Hong Kong and Xinjiang and threatens the free nation of Taiwan. In Russia, Vladimir Putin arrests, kills, and poisons and imprisons his political opponents, which is one way to win elections. In Kabul, the medieval Taliban has returned to power through brute force. North Korea remains a prison for millions. stuck in a country serving a life sentence, but they've committed no crime. So it's a tough picture out there, as all of you know, as supporters of democracy in the world. But the good news is that small d Democrats are actually fighting back all over the world, that the forces of freedom are not standing still. For the people of Cuba, who've suffered under such a brutal regime since 1959, we saw them take to the streets earlier this year to demand their most basic rights. In Burma, a fearless nation stood up and pushed back against a military junta that usurped political power, stole power from a democratically elected government. In Lithuania, people opened their arms to Belarusians fighting and fleeing the corrupt and violent Lukashenko regime. We've also just witnessed extraordinary courage from frontline medical workers, doctors, scientists, and others who have done everything they can to help us defeat this virus. We know that national emergencies often lead to the exploitation of political power by unelected officials. The coronavirus has been no exception to that, but the brave individuals we're going to honor tonight and hear from, they've stood up to that. They've raised their voices when they were told to be silent. They understand that government exists to serve its citizens. Citizens don't exist to serve their governments. They are lights that shine in the darkness, and tonight we will honor these democracy heroes for their undying and courageous commitment to self-determination and freedom for their people and for all people. We'll hear from several friends and special guests tonight. Senator Mitch McConnell will present our Freedom Award to the people of Burma. Senator Joni Ernst will present an award to democracy heroes who've taken on the COVID challenge. Senator Rick Scott will present the award to the people of Cuba, and Senator Lindsey Graham will present the award to the people of Lithuania and Belarus. Now, while we celebrate the courage of tonight's honorees, we also have to remember that the campaign for democracy is a mission that doesn't end. Right now, there are political prisoners in jail cells who are counting on us and others to keep up their fight. They're relying on all of us to provide the voice that's been taken from them, and we can't let them down. These are the John McCain Freedom Awards. We're very honored to have Cindy McCain here with us tonight. Senator McCain was chairman of IRI for 25 years, and of course he said, nothing in life is more liberating than to fight for a cause greater than yourself, something that encompasses you but is not defined by your existence alone. Everyone all over the world wants a chance to help create a more perfect union in the country that they love, in the country that they call home. At IRI, we work every single day around the world to help give people that chance. So thank you all for being here. It's my pleasure to introduce and welcome our indomitable chairman, Senator Dan Sullivan.
Well, good evening, everybody, and it is a great honor to be with you tonight as the chairman of IRI, and I think we're going to have a great awards ceremony, and then my understanding, we're all together, we're going to go out, have a cocktail after. Is that right, Dan? Is that okay? So we're going to make this a fun night as well as a serious night. But I do want to thank Dan Twining for his exceptional, energized leadership. How about a round of applause for him? Doing a great job. And he already mentioned the IRI board, so many of my incredible Senate colleagues for being here tonight, and so many of all of you supporters of IRI who have made this such a successful evening. Now tonight, as Dan mentioned, we're going to celebrate democracy and its heroes and thank those who work across the globe to counter one of the 21st century's most significant challenges that we're seeing, and that is the rise of powerful authoritarian governments. The heroes we honor come from different continents, hold different religious beliefs, celebrate different customs from different cultures, but they have one thing in common. They believe that every individual should control his or her own destiny, and all people have a right to self-governance. That's what we believe. So tonight we honor the people of Cuba who courageously took to the streets in defiance of a brutal dictatorship that has ruled by fear for over 60 years. We honor the Burmese people who stood up and demonstrated to the world that a military junta cannot be allowed to attack and replace a democratically elected government. We honor the people of Lithuania, a nation that came to the aid of its neighbors, the Belarusians who had been protesting the criminal and corrupt Lukashenko regime. And we honor those who directly confronted the global pandemic, threatening their personal and political freedom. Over the past year, these and others have rallied to break the chains of oppression in their countries and to provide a model, a light in some of the darkest places in the world. I'd like to say a few words about another one of these lights, Taiwan, whose democracy is being threatened with extinction by an authoritarian government of immense power, ambition, and appetite. Some see the defense of democratic values in places like Taiwan as a luxury that we cannot afford in an age of sharpened geopolitical competition. I reject that view. IRI rejects that view. Importantly, American law, particularly the Taiwan Relations Act, rejects that view, which, among other things, this law states, quote, "The United States will consider any effort to determine the future of Taiwan by other than peaceful means a threat to the peace and security of the Western Pacific area and an issue of grave concern to the United States." The free world cannot be neutral in the contest between freedom and authoritarianism that is underway throughout the world right now, particularly in the Indo-Pacific region. American alliances and power and ingenuity helped build a world that provided more freedom and prosperity to more people than ever before. In fact, United States democracy, bolstered by a strong military, has done more to liberate humankind from oppression and tyranny, literally hundreds of millions of people, than any other force in human history. And as Americans, that's something we can all be proud of. The Chinese Communist Party knows exactly what it wants to accomplish: to make the world safe for its authoritarian government, to export its dictatorship model to other countries, to separate America from our democratic allies, and to erode U.S. global leadership. A world governed by Xi Jinping's totalitarian vision would be a world unsafe for America and our friends, and certainly unsafe for democracy. That's why Taiwan is so central to the future of the free world. It is a thriving, prosperous Chinese democracy that holds free elections and in which power is bounded by the law. For that reason, it threatens the CCP's central premise that one man ruling in perpetuity by crushing all dissent knows what's best for 1.4 billion people. The Chinese Communist Party has already crushed Hong Kong, once a bastion of liberty. And I don't like to say it, but it's true. The free world barely raised a finger in protest. Should America and the world stand by as China does something similar to Taiwan, a peaceful democracy of 25 million people who voted for an entirely different future, that would not simply undermine the security of the Western Pacific, as the Taiwan Relations Act says. A violent military takeover of Taiwan by the CCP would be a sea change in how the world is ordered. It would change the 21st century's history in a way that the guns of August of 1914 changed the 20th century. It's important to say this. Taiwan is therefore not some peripheral sideshow in terms of global great power competition. It is the front line between freedom and tyranny, like West Berlin was during the height of the Cold War. It is also an issue that has been weaved in and out of the careers of so many professionals and the people here, countless Americans, including my own. Over 25 years ago, in 1995 and 96, I was a Marine infantry officer deployed to the Taiwan Strait as part of a Marine amphibious task force. and 2 U.S. carrier strike groups, all in response to the Chinese Communist Party's aggressive military provocations on the eve of presidential elections in Taiwan. The third Taiwan Strait crisis, that period is now called. This was an important demonstration of American commitment and resolve to an emerging democracy and partner that is still remembered today. 20 years later, on a codel to Taiwan, led by the senator we recognize and celebrate tonight, and it's great having Cindy here, Senator John McCain, I was asked by the newly elected president whether I had ever been to Taiwan. It took me a few seconds to answer, and I said, well, yes, Madam President, I have been to Taiwan before, but never on land. More recently, I was part of another bipartisan demonstration of American commitment and resolve when I traveled to Taiwan with Democrat Senators Tammy Duckworth and Chris Coons to provide American vaccines, close to 1 million, for the Taiwanese people in the face of the Chinese Communist Party's aggressive attempts to prevent the citizens of Taiwan from receiving this life-saving medicine. American commitment and resolve for Taiwan has been part of our law, heritage, trade, economics, and military deployments for decades, and it should be for decades to come. So now is the time, particularly at this wonderful celebration of IRI, for all democracies to recognize they need to get off the fence, for the free world to stand together to make sure that the authoritarian aggression we are seeing will fail in the 21st century just as it ultimately failed in the 20th century. Our values of freedom, innovation, individual rights, and openness are the values that the Chinese Communist Party is most afraid of. We must be ready as democracies to defend these values or risk a world increasingly governed by autocracy, surveillance, aggression, and conflict. Let me conclude with a quote from the great President Ronald Reagan, the National Endowment and IRI, father about freedom. Here's what he said, and I'm sure many of you have heard it. Freedom is a fragile thing. It is never more than one generation away from extinction. It must be fought for and defended constantly by each generation, for it comes only once to a people, and those in world history who have known freedom and then lost it have never known it again. We have so many allies and IRI's just cause. All of you here tonight, certainly, and it's not just the citizens of our fellow democracies, it's literally billions of additional allies around the world, citizens on every continent, in every country, including China, chafing for greater freedom, dignity, and individual liberty. I want to thank all of you again for being here tonight, for being such great supporters of IRI, and we now have a video presentation on our democracy heroes during the pandemic. Thank you very much.
COVID-19 has changed the world forever. Hundreds of millions around the world have gotten sick, and millions have died. Some authoritarian regimes have used COVID to further clamp down on their control. Most countries around the world, however, are working tirelessly to keep their populations safe and to ensure a healthy future. The European Democracy Youth Network has 2 exemplary leaders to commend as true democracy heroes of COVID. Donyet Bislimi is one such individual. As an elected official, he made sure COVID patients received financial support from the municipality, such as rent relief for low-income families. As a physician, Donyet stepped up to protect his community, traveling as a volunteer to support efforts on the border between Kosovo and North Macedonia. Alex Hemersky is another. He played a central role in the country's early response to the pandemic by supporting overwhelmed hospital staff, delivering food and supplies to isolated seniors, and helping people in quarantine. He took an active role in the vaccination campaign, volunteering on weekends and holidays to guide people through the process.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage IRI board member and U.S. Senator Joni Ernst.
Thank you. Thank you very much, and it is wonderful to be here this evening. Thank you so much, Dan, and all of our wonderful colleagues and guests, and of course our award winners. And I am so thankful to be here this evening with this opportunity to recognize IRI's Freedom Award winners. To everyone here and IRI team members worldwide, thank you for dedicating your time and talents to promoting democracy, good governance, and the rule of law. For 38 years, IRI has maintained the conviction that freedom is the inalienable and universal right of all human beings. I wholeheartedly agree, and thank you for carrying the torch. Your mission to advance democracy and liberty and the corresponding commitments to transparency and justice must continue to be backed by a U.S. foreign policy that preserves, protects, and promotes democracy around the world. The United States must continue to demonstrate reliable partnership to our allies and peoples aspiring to freedom. Our capacity to lead the world toward peace and protect the homeland depends on those commitments. IRI does its work in a very challenging world. Competing superpowers, corrupt autocrats, and violent extremists are putting IRI's ideals and goals to the test every single year with increasing intensity. And this past year has been no exception. Worldwide, the heavy burden of the COVID-19 pandemic lifted freedoms and limited freedoms and disrupted lives. But for individuals living under authoritarian rule, the pandemic's deadly cost was multiplied. The world's darkest regimes crippled their society's ability to confront the pandemic's challenges, restricting access to information and resources, and prioritizing political repression over public health. The Chinese Communist Party, in particular, used COVID-19 as a method to leverage their authority and power against the free world, denying access and transparency on the origins of the virus and critical data that cost the lives of thousands. But thankfully, when the world gets darker, the light of freedom can shine even brighter. With the aid of each of you in IRI, citizens in democracies around the world stepped up to solve the challenges in this environment. Young leaders emerged on the front lines of the crisis and courageously fought back against the dangers of repression and authoritarianism hiding behind COVID-19. Tonight, we recognize two young men, one from Kosovo, the other from Poland, who demonstrated their commitment to a free and democratic approach to combating a disease against the stacked odds of a global pandemic through their work with the European Democracy Youth Network. Donjet Bizlimi is a physician and elected official and president of the Democratic Party of Kosovo's youth wing. He worked with public officials and passed over 60 initiatives related to COVID-19 in the early days of the pandemic. He also volunteered to travel to the border between Kosovo and North Macedonia, where he performed testing on people transitioning the two countries. Alex Homersk is a strategic advisor to the mayor of Warsaw and a reservist in the Polish Armed Forces. As a reservist, Alex played a central role in fighting the pandemic by supporting hospital staff with triage, delivering food and supplies to isolated seniors, and conducting checks on people in quarantine. Later in the pandemic, Alex took an active role in the vaccination campaign, volunteering on weekends and holidays to guide people through the vaccination sites, an effort that was acknowledged in a personal letter of appreciation from the local governor. This year, we are honored to recognize these two brave individuals as democracy's heroes. Alex could not be with us this evening, but please join us in welcoming Donyette Bislimi to the stage to receive the John S. McCain Freedom Award. Congratulations, Donyette. Thank you so very much. Oh, yes. Thank you. Please thank him once again. Nice to meet you too.
Thank you, Senator Ernst. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, supporters and advocates for the cause of freedom around the world. It is my pleasure to be here with you tonight, accepting this award, honoring the heroes of democracy in the front lines of the fight against COVID-19 pandemic. On behalf of my friend from the European Democracy Youth Network, Alex Hamersky, who wishes he could be here as well, I want to offer my thanks to the International Republic Institute for this great honor. As some of you may know, I am a proud citizen of the Republic of Kosovo. My country owes its existence today to brave people who struggled and sacrificed their lives for the promise of freedom, peace, and prosperity. The heroes of my parents and my grandparents, generations, were deeply grateful to have the support and aid of Americans, like John McCain, who understood that the aspiration for freedom is not the exclusive concern of any nation or creed. It's universal aspiration that lives in the heart of every human being. So that whenever human beings struggle for their freedom, we have a moral obligation to stand with them. Today, through our struggle is different from generation before us. The aspiration for freedom remains strong in our hearts of my generation, in Kosovo and across all Europe. It is that aspiration that has called me and my peers in the European Democracy Youth Network to step up and confront the challenges we face together. We are young leaders from places that share totalitarian histories, from Tallinn to Tirana, from Prague to Baku. We recognize our responsibility to carry the cause of democracy and freedom, and understand that our cause faces no shortage of challengers today, including the COVID-19 pandemics. COVID has put pressure on governments to meet public needs in ways previously unimagined. The world's democracies have had to navigate these challenges while still being held accountable to their citizens, a complication the world's authoritarians have done away with. And yet, COVID-19 has also shown the greatest strength of the world's democracies, the ability of free citizens like Alex and myself to make an impact on our communities for the better. So, tonight, we remember that just as freedom does not come without struggle, progress does not come without freedom. Once again, on behalf of the young leaders of European Democracy Youth Network, we are honored to stand side by side with both our peers and the generations before us to ensure that the values of freedom and democracy we hold in common will triumph in the face of COVID-19 and every other challenge we'll face together. Thank you very much.
Hoy yo te invito a caminar por mis solares, para demostrarte de que sirven tus ideales. Somos humanos, aunque no pensemos iguales. No nos tratemos ni dañemos como animales. Esta es mi forma de decírtelo. Llora mi pueblo y siento yo su voz. Tú 5-9, yo doble 2. 60 años, trancada al dominó. Bombo y platillo a los 500 de La Habana. Mientras en casa las cazuelas ya no tienen jama. Que celebramos si la gente anda deprisa. Cambiando Che Guevara, llama al tipo la divisa. Todo ha cambiado, ya no es lo mismo. Entre tú y yo hay un abismo. Publicidad, un paraíso, un varadero. Mientras las madres lloran por sus hijos que se fueron. Se acabó. Tu 5-9, yo doble 2. Ya se acabó. 60 años, trancada al dominó, mira. Se acabó. Tu 5-9, yo doble 2. Ya se acabó. 60 años, trancada al dominó.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage U.S. Senator Rick Scott.
Well, first I want to thank everybody at IRI for what you do every day. We're blessed to live in democracy, and then we all hope everybody in the world has the same opportunity we have. Tonight I have a great pleasure of honoring the brave people of Cuba. This year we have seen the Cuban people organize and rise up fearlessly against the oppressive, illegitimate, communist Cuban regime. In a show of unity and strength, on July 11th, demonstrators began marching in the streets and voicing their opposition against communist rule. Beginning in Santiago de los Baños and Palma Soriano, the message of Patria y Vida spread all the way to Santa Clara and Santiago de Cuba. Cuban families and demonstrators stood against the revolution's motto of Patria or Muerte, to once again declare that the revolution had absolutely failed. It promised prosperity and equality for all, but the only equal thing about it is poverty, suffering, and oppression for all, except, of course, the Castro family and their cronies who live in opulence. Through news outlets and social media, we saw ordinary Cuban families peacefully demonstrate against the illegitimate communist regime that has stripped them of their freedom, liberty, and basic human rights and dignity for more than 60 years. We watched as families gathered outside the headquarters of the Cuban Communist Party and chant, "Cuba isn't yours." Their message was clear. It is time for a new day of freedom and democracy in Cuba. The unity of the Cuban people and their strength have revealed something. Castro and Diaz-Canel are terrified of the Cuban people. They see the resilience of the people, and they see that the people have a will to claim back their island from tyranny. After 6 decades of wrongfully denying the Cuban people their land, their dignity, and their freedom, the people are saying enough is enough. The bravery of the Cuban people are scaring the communist dictators. That's why Castro and Diaz-Canel have cut off internet access, and it's why the regime is increasing censorship, and why hundreds of Cuba's democratic activists have been thrown in jail. It's why they've targeted Afro-Cuban leaders like Dr. Oscar Elias Bisset and Berta Soler. They know that Cubans are not afraid and will not stop until they regain their freedom. Today marks 100 days since the movement for freedom began. To the Cuban people, the world has seen your strength and determination. We have heard your cries for freedom, and we join you in your chants for libertad, patria y vida. This movement cannot end without change. Today, every freedom-loving country must join forces to support freedom and democracy in Cuba. And the United States must set an example for the world by calling for the release of these peaceful demonstrators. I introduced the Democracia Act, a bill that levels targeted sanctions against anyone who assists or financially aids the communist Cuban military. In July, as Cubans living in the United States gathered outside the White House, demand President Biden stand for freedom and democracy, I and many others stood at that rally and have amplified their cause to world leaders and to the highest levels of our government. We've stood in the front of the illegitimate Cuban embassy and called for its removal and called for the end to policies which appease Castro and Diaz-Canel. I'm thankful for organizations like IRI, which are raising awareness about the plight of Cubans. and I hope we are able to work towards a future of freedom on the island. I've had the chance to talk in Florida with countless Cubans living in Florida who have risked their lives to flee Castro's brutal repression. Many of them came here with nothing, scarred by the oppression of the regime, but hopeful for a new life. But with what little they had, they started businesses and they built a thriving community. I've witnessed their resolve to fight for freedom, support their families, and contribute to their communities. They are an example of the American dream and a testimony to the ills of communism and socialism. The Cuban people are a source of inspiration for all of us. They show us what can be accomplished when you have freedom and opportunity. That's why we continue to fight for the end of communism in Cuba and for the freedom and liberties of every Cuban family. It's why we should all join them and say, abajo la dictadura, patria, vida y libertad. This evening, I am proud to present the 2021 John S. McCain Freedom Award to the people of Cuba. Tonight gives us a chance to remember the many groups who are leading the charge against the communist dictatorship. We thank Jose Daniel Ferrer and the members of the Patriotic Union of Cuba who have firmly stood for the liberties of all Cuban families. We remember Las Damas de Blanco, the wives and relatives of political prisoners and peaceful activists in Cuba, who are routinely repressed, censored, beaten, and unjustly imprisoned by the Castro and Diaz-Canel regime. And we remember Luis Manuel Ortega Alcantara and the San Isidro movement, who have stood against censorship and government control of art and media. We stand with every brave pro-democracy activist and pledge to not stop until Cuba sees freedom again. Now I'd like to welcome Grammy Award-winning artist Willie Chirino to the stage to accept the John S. McCain Award on behalf of the wonderful people of Cuba. Big welcome to Willie Chirino.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Members of the IRA, elected officials, and distinguished guests, I am honored and humbled to receive this year's Freedom Award on behalf of the Cuban people. I am an artist who for 50 years have tried to make the world aware of the tyranny my country has been living under. For I believe it is an artist's duty to decry injustice and oppression wherever we see it. In 1959, a power-hungry dictator took away our freedoms and willed himself to being the absolute and only voice that should and would be heard in Cuba. All other voices were silenced, many of them by firing squads. For 6 decades, most of the world has ignored the crimes committed by these tyrants in an almost conspiratorial silence. But this past July 11th, something changed. Something unprecedented that cannot be overlooked and from which there is no return. The Cuban people peacefully took to the streets, demanding the most essential of rights, the freedom to forge their own destiny. And the lament was met with guns, beatings, arrests, and the inconceivable order from their so-called president to go and do whatever is necessary to repress the revolt. He called for brother to kill brother in order to defend the failed revolution. This movement for liberty and democracy in Cuba is a crusade that includes youth, artists, writers, religious and opposition organizations, and many others. The system for social domination created by the dictatorship has fallen apart. Now they rely only on brutal repression to keep themselves in power. Activists throughout Cuba are working to organize a national strike, which includes diverse initiatives such as the march on November 15th, which the government has already banned. These and other activities are essential so that the flame that was lit July of this year is not extinguished. There is a widespread consensus for change in Cuba and a desire to break totally from communism. But these efforts, ladies and gentlemen, require international support and solidarity. I'll say it again. These efforts require international support and solidarity. Please don't let the cries of the Cuban people be unheard. I joined the good people of Lithuania, Belarus, and Burma tonight in the quest for freedom and democracy for their nations. Time has stood still for my island for over 60 years. And I know that Cuba has an abundance of talent inside and outside the island that will successfully govern and lead our country into democracy once it gains its freedom and takes its rightful place in the universal order. The time for Cuban freedom is now. The time for freedom in Cuba is now. Thank you very much.
Que se lleven todo lo malo, que se vaya, no aguantamos más los palos, que se vayan ya, porque el pueblo sufre y calla, que se lleven la metralla.
En nombre del pueblo de Cuba, acepto el premio a la libertad. Acepto el premio a la libertad en nombre del pueblo de Cuba.
Acepto el premio a la libertad en nombre del pueblo cubano.
Acepto el premio a la libertad en nombre del pueblo de Cuba.
Acepto el premio a la libertad en nombre del pueblo de Cuba.
Acepto el premio a la libertad en nombre del pueblo cubano.
Acepto el premio a la libertad en nombre del pueblo de Cuba.
Acepto el premio a la libertad en nombre del pueblo de Cuba.
Acepto el premio a la libertad en nombre del pueblo de Cuba.
Acepto el premio a la libertad en nombre del pueblo de Cuba.
Acepto el premio a la libertad en nombre del pueblo de Cuba.
Acepto el premio a la libertad en nombre del pueblo de Cuba.
Acepto el premio a la libertad en nombre del pueblo de Cuba.
Acepto el premio a la libertad en nombre del pueblo de Cuba.
Acepto el premio a la libertad en nombre del pueblo de Cuba.
Que nosotros estamos cambiando Cuba. Con la ayuda de todas las instituciones mundiales, los cubanos estamos cambiando Cuba. Por primera vez en mis 32 años, yo estoy viendo que nosotros estamos teniendo la rienda de nuestra realidad. No permitamos que nos la quiten. Ya ganamos ya ganamos.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage IRI President Dr. Daniel Twining.
This is just a little note as we all digest that very powerful sequence. Thank you, Willie and Senator, that while we were conceptualizing and cutting this video, we asked everybody we filmed, would you like us to blur your faces to protect you? And they said no. They said, no, we want the world to know. We want the world to understand what's happening in our country. And all those still photos of political prisoners, really this award fundamentally is for them and everybody in Cuba, most of whom are not political activists because everyone has to make a living, but this award is for everybody who is struggling for the most basic freedom and dignity on that troubled island. So please do join us now in honoring the people of Lithuania and the people of Belarus, whose own courage and support of democracy has really inspired us this year.
Lithuania and Belarus have a lot in common. They share a border, a similar history of independence after the fall of the Soviet Union, and a lot of other cultural connections. And recently, they have something else in common too. A strong belief that the 2020 elections in Belarus were unfree and unfair. In Belarus, citizens rose up in peaceful opposition to dictator Alexander Lukashenko. They bravely spoke out for their rights, despite facing brutal crackdowns and imprisonment. Across the border in Lithuania, thousands took to the streets in protest of an election, to demand change and to support a democratic Belarus. The government of Lithuania was the first European Union nation to openly reject the legitimacy of Alexander Lukashenko as the president of Belarus. After brutal human rights violations by the Lukashenko regime, Lithuania accepted refugees from Belarus with open arms. Lithuania has established itself as a true champion of democracy in the region, exemplified by its inspirational support for a freer Belarus. And Belarus has changed forever, thanks to brave Belarusians who remain committed to a democratic future. Together, the people of Lithuania and the people of Belarus are true heroes of democracy for their efforts to protect and fight for freer societies.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage IRI board member and U.S. Senator Lindsey Graham.
Thank you all. Well, I'm honored to be here. First, I want to announce that Cindy was reported out of the Foreign Relations Committee today to be ambassador to the World Food Program over in Rome, which means I'm going to Rome. But I want to put a plug in for Cindy, and we'll talk about the topic here in a moment. But Cindy is going to be an ambassador to a program that I think can change the world as much as anything. We give a lot of aid to the world through the World Food Program. David Beasley, some of you are familiar with David, I'm sure. They received the Nobel Peace Prize, the World Food Program did. He's the former governor of South Carolina and done such a wonderful job of feeding people with no other options, keeping people alive. But Cindy has part of the program that's going to teach people how to farm. And there was no better farmer than John McCain. That's a joke, you can laugh. He couldn't spell farm. So Cindy, I'm excited about what you can do for the developing world, that the technology we have here at our land-grant universities and the American business community coming together to teach people to feed themselves. So congratulations, sweetheart, for all you've done and you're going to do. To the two Dans, thank you. There are actually women in the IRI program. Both of you do a great job. Dan, thank you for staying involved and being the chair. And Dan, thank you for every day being out there toiling. And since I'm on the Appropriations Committee funding this program, Mitch came before me. I like your chances of getting money this year, if we can ever figure out how to fund the government. The reason I like your chances is because this is one area where there's a lot of bipartisanship. Before I got to be Foreign Ops, now co-chair with Chris Coons, Mitch had that job, and it's a small account, but it makes a big difference. It's about $56 billion. It funds the State Department, and Colin Powell, we're remembering him. The one thing that I remember most about Colin was his love for the Foreign Service officers. They're heroes in their own way. We all love the military. John McCain was an American military hero, but I've got to learn through managing this account how brave our young men and women are in the Foreign Service, and they're out there fighting for freedom just as much as anybody in uniform. So I want to recognize them tonight. IRI, NDI, we need you now more than ever, right? The world's going in the wrong direction on multiple fronts, and what you do is you bring attention to causes that are worthy to be noted. You make it hard for bad people to get away with bad things by shining a spotlight. And tonight we're shining a spotlight on two countries that I've come to know. I've been to the Baltics a lot with Senator McCain. John loved that part of the world. It was beautiful, hardy people living in the former Soviet Union, tasting freedom. And he just had a love for the region. And I've went to Lithuania many times with John, and he just had an affinity for the culture and the people. And we're giving this award tonight to the people of Lithuania for not forgetting that freedom comes with a price. The price is you have to open up the door to a neighbor who's losing their freedom. And so many mature democracies have gotten soft, quite frankly. Lithuania has not gotten soft. And that's why we're recognizing the people of Lithuania tonight. When Belarus, your neighbor, needed you the most, you were there. And the question for all of us, are we there as much as Lithuania? It's got to be tough in your own backyard to take on a ruthless dictator who's been there forever and has Russia's backing. But you did it because you know what it's like to live without your freedom. So that's why Lithuania is being recognized tonight. I think they stand for the proposition that those of us who are free have an obligation to pass it on. And you want to talk about Taiwan? What are we willing to do to protect Taiwan? Let me just say this. If you're not willing to do a lot, then you're going to regret it. Because people in Lithuania and Belarus are fighting for their freedom. They've got to be wondering after Afghanistan, what the hell's going on in the world? One thing affects the other. And that's what I learned from John McCain. We've traveled the world and had a hell of a time. But John always said, weakness anywhere leads to aggression everywhere. So I just want to remind everybody here that what we do at IRI and NDI is more important than it's ever been. And to the folks in Belarus, you took to the streets peacefully, and they're trying to silence you through using violence. You will win in the end. Russia's all in to prop this guy up. And John McCain hated a lot of people. There's a real long list, but this Lyshenko guy's got to be near the top. He hated this bastard. So he really did, for good reason. So to our friends in Belarus, I met the opposition a couple of months ago. We're all watching and admiring you. And it's got to be tough when all the security forces turn on you and your family. So one thing, talk about freedom as an intellectual concept. It's another thing when somebody knocks on your door. And you have to pay a price for standing up like they're doing in Cuba, like they're doing in Belarus, and so many other places. So tonight, we acknowledge and honor the bravery of those in Belarus who are willing to have their door knocked on, who are willing to look forward and not accept the status quo any longer. And the question for all of us, this award is important, but what will we do in addition to the award? So I'm working with Senator Jean Shaheen to form a caucus for Belarus to make sure that the Congress, that we can bring to bear whatever tools we have available to us to support the opposition. Let the world know that if you give Belarus a pass, you're going to offend the United States, and you don't want to do that. As to Lithuania, you just make us proud because you have learned the best lesson that can be learned from freedom. Don't take it for granted, and when somebody's lost theirs, help them. So it is my honor and privilege tonight to provide this award to two people who I cannot begin to say their name, but I'm going to give it a whirl. We got to honor Ireland for something. So just for having Irish names. Tatia, yes. Homicha, is that right? Yeah, from Belarus. Thank you so much for being here. And from Lithuania, J. Gum Mantas Pavel Jonas. I think that means Bob. So come on up and get this award, and thank you very much for your bravery and your courage. Truly is a small world. Yeah. Yeah, let's get up here in the light.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Well, actually, it had to be my prime minister, and I really hope that she will come to take that wonderful sign of your friendship. But just let me say a few words from my own behalf. I was ambassador here for 5 years, and now I'm back in Lithuanian Parliament fighting for a lot of freedoms, to be honest. And what I was always trying to say when I'm back in DC, I was trying to inspire my brothers and sisters Americans. Look to us in the Baltics. Actually, you did it. You know, we are one of the best examples of transformation. After everything you did for us, you never recognized our occupation. You've been fighting for us to raise that flag 30 years ago here in Washington, D.C. and over the globe. You've been fighting for our NATO membership, but please don't stop. We can really do a lot for Belarusians. You know, Timothy Snyder was calling them the bloodlands of bloodlands. They suffered so much from all those authoritarian regimes, and we can really do it. This ugly dictator, this terrorist regime is so weak today. We just have to unite and do it and let those, you know, elections happen. Finally. And a lot of people mentioned Taiwan. Today we are standing firm on Taiwan in Lithuania. Maybe in Lithuania will be the first country where Taiwanese office will be opened with its proper name. And why not to do it everywhere? Why not to unite against the China's aggression? Because yes, if tomorrow is Taiwan, who is next? Asking a lot of nations like us. And Cuba, you know, we are the only country in EU that do not ratify EU's agreement with communist Cuban regime because we think this, you know, EU shouldn't replace the Soviet Union and shouldn't finance Castro regime because we should all fight for democracy and freedom there. And those are just few examples that we have to unite and fight. I didn't even mention Ukrainian, you know, Georgians, Moldovans. I didn't even mention the Russians who've been, you know, whose elections been stolen. They were stolen this year. They will be stolen in 24. And, you know, we are selling them for money, for gas, for everything. We have to do a lot. And please, it's not a generation away the freedom is. It's every day freedom is dying out there. It's 15 years in a row democracy is dying in the world. And we can really do a lot, creating those inspirational examples like you created in the Baltics. Somewhere here I have former NATO Secretary Rasmussen who signed accession treaty with us. I still remember that night in Copenhagen. And then Denmark was quite alone to fight for Lithuania. I remember that. But you did it, Prime Minister. Thank you for this. And we shall continue.
Dear honorees of the John McCain Freedom Award, honorable senators, dear Daniel Twinning and the IRI team, distinguished audience, I was 14 in August 1989 when 2 million Lithuanians, Latvians and Estonians joined hands in a human chain, the Baltic Way, to show the world that our nations would not rest until we regained freedom. In November the same year, the Berlin Wall fell. Several months later, Lithuania declared independence. 14 people sacrificed their lives for our freedom in January 1991. 7 were killed guarding our border half a year later, but Lithuania restored and defended its independence. As a teenager, I couldn't possibly comprehend the responsibility weighing upon those who led our nation to freedom, but I could grasp the magnitude of the moment. I knew I saw my state being reborn. I remember a sea of Lithuanian flags and the smiling, happy faces of the people declaring an end to the regime before it was actually taken down. I remember the uncertainty and the resolve, the fear and the fearlessness, the overwhelming power of peaceful crowd, the mourning of lives sacrificed, and the magical sense of freedom. Freedom that was possible to regain because of the bravery of Lithuanian people, but also because the world didn't turn a blind eye on struggle, because the nations and governments of the free world were there for us when we needed to be seen, heard, and supported. Many years have passed. Last year, Lithuania celebrated the 30th anniversary of the restored independence, while the Belarusian nation was once again deprived of its basic right to cast their votes in the elections and actually have them counted. The legendary patience of Belarusians had worn thin. Hundreds of thousands flooded the streets to demand a change. They raised their flags and their heads, and the free, independent political nation of Belarus has been reborn. Tens of thousands of people in Lithuania joined hands again in a freedom way to support Belarusians in their struggle, to remind everyone of the miracle at the Baltic Sea and encourage the people of Belarus to create a miracle of their own. The miracle has not happened yet. The Iron Curtain that we believed had been torn apart decades ago once again fell on the Belarusian with all its intolerable weight and cruelty. They have been beaten, imprisoned, expelled from universities, and fired from their jobs. Some have died for not willing to be humble, obedient, and conformist anymore. Free media and the civil society organizations have been wiped out. Tens of thousands of Belarusians have been exiled. The streets have been forcefully emptied of crowds. But the suffering of the Belarusian people continues, and today they need support of the democratic world more than ever. Lithuania is a part of that democratic world now, and I am proud that thousands of Belarusians have found a home away from home in our country. I hope they will return to a free and democratic Belarus soon. I'm proud to be part of the nation that had stood with the people of Belarus long before August 2020 and stands with them today, not because it's a government policy, but because when Lithuanians look at the people who fight for democracy and freedom, now we see ourselves 30 years ago. We remember how we needed to be seen, heard, and not left alone. And as we manage to make our leap to the side of democracy and freedom, it's our turn to give back, to extend a supporting hand to those who seek it. Be they in our neighborhood, in Belarus, Russia, Ukraine, Moldova, Georgia, or Armenia, or in a distant Hong Kong or Taiwan. Because freedom is in our DNA, and I hope that will never change. Thank you for honoring Lithuania and its people tonight. I am grateful to IRI for supporting Lithuania when we needed it most. I admire your continued efforts to promote freedom and democracy around the globe. I regret for not being able to be with you tonight, but I look forward to working together. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Tatiana Homich. I'm from Belarus. And it's a real honor for me to be awarded by John McCain Awards. Thank you very much, IRI institution. So I will start actually with a little story about myself. So I participated in a presidential campaign from May 2020, from the very beginning. I was part of Viktor Babarika team, together with my sister, Maria Kolesnikova. You probably know this women, these brave women. Everything went well for several weeks, because later, just in several weeks, a lot of people were detained. Leaders, activists, candidates, presidential candidates, and even in July we saw a beautiful trio of Maria Kolesnikova, Svetlana Tikhanovskaya, Veronika Tsepkala, who led the presidential campaign. And we, all of us saw these beautiful demonstrations throughout the country, just also for several weeks. And then we saw that elections were falsificated, our votes were stolen. I left the country, and I live more than a year already live in exile. I live in Poland. My sister Maria Kolesnikova was detained in September 2020. You probably know this story, when she ripped up her passport and they wanted her to leave the country at the border on Ukraine. And she refused to do that, actually. And she just went to Belarus, to Belarusian border, and said that she will stay. And of course, she cannot leave the country without the passport anymore. So I don't know when I will get back to my home country, to Belarus. I have my father there, I have my friend there. I don't have any usual work as a lot of people have. So I'm political and human rights activist now. But I know that I will not stop, and I don't know how much time it will take, but I will not stop because my sister is in prison, and now there are more than 800 political prisoners in Belarus. Several thousand people were tortured, and non-criminal case was raised about it. So what I want to tell you, maybe when you live in a free democratic society from your birth, you don't even notice how much you have. The opportunity to vote for the one you want, to be elected, to openly declare that you do not agree, to go to a demonstration and defend your rights, to have access to independent media. How simple it is, yes? These are taken for granted and an integral part of life itself. And for many countries and people, this is a goal that they have been striving for decades and for which we pay a very high price. And Belarus is not the only country like this. Representatives of these countries are here today with us, from Cuba, Burma, Belarus, and some of them are not here, like Nicaragua, Venezuela, and dozens. I want to express my solidarity with you. Remember that you are not alone. I know that we are not alone, and we are together. And actually, it's so strange to hear from my sister, Maria Kolesnikova, after a year in jail, that she has never felt so free. All because she knows that freedom is primarily inside, and no walls and bars can take it away. Last year, we were told that nothing would change anyway, but we turned to people, called for elections, and told everyone to start with yourself. And we saw how much can be done together when there are millions of us. We were told, you understand everything, referring to the dependence of thousands of people on the system and the inability to change anything. And we replied, we understand, but we want to fix it. We were told that we had no choice, but it turned out that each of us has the right to choose. And now we know that there are new, bright leaders in Belarus. We were told that people did not have the right to take to the streets and express disagreement, but people went until they began to receive 3, 5, 7 years in prison for peaceful protests. We also were told that there was no torture in August 2020, but we also saw thousands of beaten and even raped men and women. Some of them were forced to leave Belarus for treatment. We were told that we have no political prisoners, but thousands of people have been in custody for more than a year. Among them minors, pensioners, human rights defenders, journalists, bankers, IT specialists, and many, many others, just simple people. We were told that we have no future in Belarus, but you cannot build a country on violence, lie, and fear. Only freedom, respect for life, and human rights are fundamental for the future. Therefore, I can say with confidence that we are the future of Belarus. Thank you very much.
On February 1st, 2021, Burma's military announced it had seized power. The military detained State Councillor Aung San Suu Kyi, President Win Myint, and many others. Thousands of people took to the streets immediately in protest. Throughout 2021, resistance from across Burma has been underscored by creative expression, hope, art, and an enduring resolve that democracy is possible. The protests continue, and the Burmese people demand freedom. To the people of Burma, we stand with you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell.
Well, good evening. You know, I first began to think about Burma back in 1991 when Aung San Suu Kyi received the Nobel Peace Prize. And then, as Lindsay indicated, I found myself on the Foreign Operations Subcommittee dealing with the non-defense side of what we try to do to influence the world in an appropriate direction. I'm always reminded, Lindsay mentioned our good friend John McCain, and I wonder if Cindy's in the audience. Cindy, congratulations on your appointment. I think that's a perfect job for you. As Lindsay pointed out, when he and John used to hopscotch around the world, they always underscored the importance, even though they both had a military background, of diplomacy and foreign assistance. And one of the great things about Colin Powell was that he always was looking for a non-military solution to every problem that arose in the world, because clearly if you can achieve through diplomacy and foreign assistance what you're trying to achieve, it's a lot better than a military solution. Well, in the early days, Aung San Suu Kyi and I used to slip notes into each other because, as we all know, she was under house arrest for a couple of decades. And then all of a sudden the junta allowed an election back in 2012 out of house arrest, and I had a chance to visit her in Rangoon right after Hillary Clinton did. And then later that year, when she came to the U.S. To receive the Congressional Gold Medal and other honors she richly deserved, I asked her to come to Louisville, Kentucky, to the University of Louisville, and we had a wonderful day together, a day and a half together. She also liked horses. I took her over to central Kentucky into the horse country. So my interest in Burma has covered now some 25 years. And the distress that we all felt back in February of this year, where everything seemed to go back to where we were 10 years ago, is extremely disturbing. So, good evening, everyone. Mingalaba. There are different ways to bear witness to the sacred importance of democracy. In established democracies like the United States, our job is to keep the lamps of freedom burning bright and to support those seeking to follow in our footsteps. In younger democracies where freedom has been won more recently, it takes vigilance to preserve those gains and spade work to ensure that new norms and institutions put down lasting roots. But of course, this fight takes the starkest form and requires the most personal courage in places where freedom and tyranny remain in open contest even today. And we're talking about 3 countries where that is precisely the case tonight. The places where the scales could still tip in either direction where heroes continue to put themselves at risk to advance the future that their children and their country deserve. So that's why I'm honored to be presenting this award tonight to Ambassador Ujjal Motun on behalf of the entire people of Burma. Like many of you, I've been immersed in the journey of Burma and its incredible people, as I indicated, actually for almost 3 decades now. I proudly worked to make Burma a Senate priority. In the early 1990s, we started singling out the junta for sanctions. In 2003, my Burmese Freedom and Democracy Act became law. In 2012, after corresponding for years, as I indicated, with Aung San Suu Kyi, sometimes secretly through handwritten messages, I did have an opportunity, as I said earlier, to travel to Burma and to meet her and the people of Burma in person back in 2012. Like many of you, I've sought to be as helpful as possible through the twists and the turns, the optimism and the setbacks of the last decade. It has been so disappointing to see the military yet again violently suppress the undeniable and inextinguishable democratic aspirations of the people of Burma. But their courage remains undaunted, and the brilliance of their cause remains undimmed. Our special guest tonight underscores this. The permanent representative has showed enormous courage in recent months. He condemned the junta even as the illegitimate regime was closing its fist. He called out the international community for its failure to do enough. And listen to this, 2 months ago, he escaped an assassination plot that was broken up by the New York Police Department. His bravery and that of other Burmese diplomats who have stayed loyal to their people reflects the bravery of the entire country. Citizens have gathered fearlessly and stood up to tyranny. They've been brutalized and beaten, but they will not bow. Other Burmese officials who aspire to democracy but are afraid of the junta are undoubtedly looking to see how the democratic capitals of the world will respond to the junta's tightening grip. So I'm more than proud to confer this award. I'm also here to remind all of us that our efforts cannot stop with this ceremony. The international community must redouble its work to legitimize Burma's real government, the national unity government that represents the diversity of Burma's citizenry. America must impress the importance of this on all of our friends. The junta's violence is strengthening its democratic opponents, uniting disparate ethnic groups in the common cause of liberty. The United States and the world must do all we can to reinforce this momentum. More pressure on the junta, more sanctions, more reminders that the world's democracies can distinguish freedom's friends from freedom's foes, and will give that distinction real force. More of the steps for which my friend, Senator John McCain, would have been one of the loudest, proudest, and clearest voices. It's so fitting, I think we all agree, that this award bears his name. So, with that, I want to welcome Ambassador Ujjal Motun to the stage, not only to accept the John S. McCain Freedom Award for Democracy's Heroes, but also to receive our renewed commitment of continued support and continued friendship until the people of Burma have the government they want and they deserve. So let's have a round of applause for the people of Burma and for their permanent representative. Yeah, how do you want to do this? It's 2 pieces, so.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Okay. Watch it. It's 2 pieces.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Senator. The Honorable Senators, President, Chairman of the IRI, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the people of Myanmar, I'm honored to receive this prestigious John McCain Freedom Award. This Freedom Award and the IRI is no stranger to the people of Myanmar and their democracy levels. In 1999, our leader, State Councillor Aung San Suu Kyi, received this Freedom Award. We are proud to receive it again. The United States is the strong supporter for the democracy movement in Myanmar. IRI has played an important role. IRI has extended its continued support towards the people of Myanmar for our efforts in strengthening democracy. The Leadership Training School program initiated by IRI is the most successful one. It contributed developing the leadership skill and democratic values. Many beneficiaries of IRI are now in forefront fighting against the military dictatorship and for restoration of democracy. Taking this opportunity, we, the people of Myanmar, wish to express our sincere appreciation to the United States, in particular the IRI, for its continued support towards Myanmar even after the military coup on 1st February. As the democracy in Myanmar is at the nascent stage, the successful 2020 free and fair election is indeed a significant milestone in our history. The people of Myanmar had shown their eagerness and the attachment to the democracy through their ballots at the election. We had also demonstrated our desire to build a nation where all democratic values can be flourished, a place where each and every peace-loving individual can play a role in that nation building. Ignoring entirely the people's desire expressed through the free and fair elections, the military staged a coup on 1st February. Then people from all walks of life have come out on the street all over the country to express our disappointment with the military. The people of Myanmar are resilient, perseverant, and united in fighting for the end of the military coup, release of all unlawful detainees, and restoration of democracy in Myanmar. As such, I wish to thank all people inside and outside Myanmar, including the Generation Z, those who joined CDM, and those who joined People's Defenses Revolution. I salute all of them for their courage and hard work. The National Unity Government is actively seeking accountability and justice for past and ongoing serious crimes amounting to crimes against humanity committed by the military, including against Rohingya people in 2017. We are fighting for justice. Justice must prevail. We, CRPH, NUG, EAOs, CSOs, and all people are resolute and together in unity to reach our goal of ending this murderous military and building a federal democratic union. We all need your continued support in our collective struggle to eliminate this military dictatorship and emerge Myanmar as an inclusive, democratic, and peaceful country. In this regard, I would like to appeal you all as follows. 1. Provide continued support, including political, diplomatic, and financial support. Advocate to recognize the NUG as a legitimate government of Myanmar. Persuade countries in the region and beyond to put further pressure on the military through cutting financial flow into the military. 4. Provide humanitarian assistance to the people in need through all possible means, including cross-border assistance. I wish to conclude by reiterating my further commitment to the advancement of democracy, freedom, and human rights in Myanmar and beyond. And thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador, for that call to action. Thank you, Senator McConnell, for your leadership of this and the cause of freedom. We have people around the world joining us virtually, so thank you for being with us. For those of you here in the flesh, please join us in the hall to raise a glass to democracy's heroes. Thank you. Good night.